Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3. If you've already read it, you'll appreciate the title, Faith on Fire. There was a tightrope walker who did incredible aerial feats. All over Paris, he would do tightrope acts tremendously at such scary heights. Then he had succeeding acts. He would do it blindfolded. And then he would go across the tightrope. And then he would go blindfolded pushing a wheelbarrow. An American promoter read about this in the papers and wrote a letter to the tightrope walker saying, "Mr. Tightrope Walker, I don't believe you can do it, but I'm willing to make you an offer. For a very substantial sum of money, besides all of your transportation fees, I would like to challenge you to do your act over Niagara Falls." So Mr. Tightrope Walker wrote back, "Sir, although I've never been to America or seen the falls, I'd love to come." Well, after a lot of promotion and settling the whole thing up, many people came to the event. Mr. Tightrope Walker was to start on the Canadian side and come to the American side. Drums roll, and he comes across the rope which is suspended over the treacherous part of the falls, blindfolded. And he makes his way across easily. The crowds go wild, and he comes to the promoter and says, "Well, Mr. Promoter, now do you believe that I can do it?" "Well, of course I do. I just saw you do it." Mr. Tightrope Walker says, "No. Do you really believe I can do it?" "Well, of course I can. You just did it." No, says Mr. Tightrope Walker. "Do you believe that I can do it?" "Yes," says the promoter, "I believe you can do it." "Good," says Mr. Tightrope Walker. "Then you will get in the wheelbarrow." It's easy to talk the talk. It's real easy to talk the talk. But how many of us are genuinely willing and able to get in the wheelbarrow of faith? We like to think that we're on top of our game. We like to think that nobody can stop us, and I love Jesus, and nobody can cut me down, and all this sort of stuff. And you know what? Today we're going to be challenged to get in the wheelbarrow. Today, as we do Daniel chapter 3, God wants you to witness a presentation of faith. God wants you to witness a presentation of faith. As we did last week, we're not going to read this whole chapter because these chapters can get kind of long, 30 verses for chapter 3. We'll read it as we go through it. But it's sufficient to say that God wants you to witness a presentation of faith. Faith is presented to us by the three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If you ever read this to your kids at night, to bed we go. Get it? Ta-ting-ching. Thank you. I'll be here all morning. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Faith is presented to us by these three men in the following ways. As we start to examine chapter 3, verses 1 through 18, faith requires an examination. Faith requires an examination. Second way that this faith is presented to us, verses 19 through 25. Faith remains with endurance. Faith remains with endurance. And then finally, the third way that faith is presented to us by these three men. First, we've seen it requires examination. It remains with endurance. And in the third way, faith rewards with elevation. I had 2 letters alliterated this week. Cheryl, how'd you like that? Usually it's just one.
What's that?
I thought you'd like that. 2 letters of alliteration this week, the R and the E. Did you catch that?
Oh, no, I was busy writing them down.
You'd have caught it eventually, right?
Yeah.
So faith requires an examination. Faith remains with endurance, and faith rewards with elevation. These are the things that we're going to learn today as we examine these ways that faith is presented to us by these men. So, this is why it's really important that you read Daniel chapter 3. You may be lost at this point if you haven't read it. But if you've read it, you know exactly what we're talking about. So let's start to look at this. Number 1, faith requires an examination. So last week we talked about the image of Nebuchadnezzar in his dream. And Daniel was able, through God, to not only tell Nebuchadnezzar what his dream was, but also the interpretation of it. And so now we have this image in our minds as well, because now we know what Nebuchadnezzar's dream was. And Nebuchadnezzar, now we don't know how much time has passed since the end of chapter 2, but Nebuchadnezzar, as pompous as he was, has this image now that everybody knows about since Daniel was able to interpret this dream. He's got a bright idea. You don't know what his idea is? Let's read it. Daniel chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold. So he saw this image in his dream, and he thought, you know what? What better thing to do than make this a reality? I'm going to take this image from my dream. I'm going to make this image out of gold. It's going to be big, too. Made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. Now that might not mean a lot to you unless you do all of your carpentry in cubits. Does anybody do that? Charlie, you're old enough that you might still be doing it in cubits. But the rest of us use feet anymore. And this would be about 90 feet. 90 feet high and a 9-foot wide base. Now, there's a lot of people out there that like to cut down the Bible. You ever know anybody that likes to cut down the Bible, that says the Bible's full of errors, the Bible's a bunch of garbage, it's a bunch of hokiness, you can't trust it? This is one of those examples that they like to throw in our face, is the Bible can't be trusted. There's no way that any statue could be like this. What don't they realize? That a statue could totally be like this. In fact, there are a lot of statues that are just like this. Now, they might not be this exact, dimension necessarily, but there's a lot of statues that are really tall with a kind of a narrow base, like, the Statue of Liberty. It's kind of tall, and it doesn't have like the biggest base in the world. So this sort of thing is possible, and Nebuchadnezzar does it. And he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So this is going to be Nebuchadnezzar's big deal here. And then King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. How grand do you suspect this image was that King Nebuchadnezzar made out of gold? This is a big deal. Did you notice all of the officials that are listed here? Everybody that was anybody. This is a who's who of the important people of Babylon are expected to be here for the dedication of this image. So at the dedication of this image, Nebuchadnezzar decides that at any time that this music is going to be played, so he's going to have musicians here, and at any time that music is played, everybody would need to bow down and worship the image that he has built. Does anybody have a problem with this? I do. Do you? I have a small problem here, Nebuchadnezzar. I'm not interested in worshiping your big old gold statue. Would you worship the statue? Would you worship, if there was somebody that come along and said, you know what, this is what we're going to do from now on. We're going to bow down to the statue. Do you do it? How many rules and edicts do you bow down to that are compromising to your Christian faith that you don't even really know that you're doing that? Where you kind of bend the rules a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. Have you ever thought in your heart, okay, I know I'm supposed to worship this statue, and maybe I'll get down on my knees, but you know what? In my heart, I am not worshiping that statue. I'll bow down. I'll do all the external things, but you know what? In my heart, I am not worshiping anything. How many of us bend rules like that, and we try to compromise, and we try to put one toe in the pool, and we just try to make this be what we want it to be. And we can struggle with stuff, and we just get really, we can just get really worked up about stuff. Nebuchadnezzar is really excited about this image. He is really interested in everybody worshiping this thing because he built it and he's the great king of Babylon. He made this image. He's bringing everybody downtown to visit this thing, to dedicate it. He's going to have the musicians play some really great music, and you had better bow down. And he's not messing around. In fact, he's going to take it one step further. If you're not going to bow down to this image, we're going to kill you. How do you like me now? We're going to throw you in a fiery furnace if you don't bow down to this statue. In fact, according to Jeremiah chapter 29 and verse 22, the Babylonians, in fact, would burn people alive like this. So this is a very legitimate threat. In fact, we have external evidence from the book of Jeremiah that Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians would burn people alive in a fiery furnace for disobedience. So this did happen. He wasn't just making some idle threat here. He would burn people for doing things. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. So what happened? We got some boys here that didn't bow down to the image. We got some troublemakers in our midst. We got some people that need wrangling, is what we got. In fact, 3 of them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as I like to call them. They didn't bow down. They stood their ground. So we're not worshiping this image. I don't care what happens. Now, as we think about what happened here, it says, therefore, at this time, certain Chaldeans. So as you take a stand for God, and sometimes we don't take a stand for God because we're afraid of what people are going to say. We're afraid that if we're in the cafeteria and we bow down to pray for our meal before we eat, that everybody's going to think that we're dummies. So we just will sit there with our eyes forward. We don't close our eyes. We don't bow our head. And we think that if I pray like this for my meal in the cafeteria, then nobody will know what I'm doing. But I'm still praying before my meal. You know what I'm saying? We like to bend these things a little bit. Why don't you close your eyes and bow your head down and actually properly pray? Some of why we do what we do as Christians is to show other people that we believe. And if you're going to take that element out of it, what's the point? You're either going to believe in him or you're not going to believe in him. Get yourself in the wheelbarrow or get out of that wheelbarrow. All right? But it's not everybody in the empire that is making an accusation, though. So we're afraid that it's going to be everybody that's just going to, we're sitting at the cafeteria and all of a sudden everybody's going to get up and come descend upon us because we bowed our head. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is there might be a few people, though, that get really upset. They get a little excited, a little interested in what you're doing. These boys, when they didn't bow down, it was just a few of the Chaldeans that came forward to bring accusation against the boys here. Also, by the way, this is the first use. If you get your concordance out and look up the word Jew, first time in the Old Testament, in the book of Daniel here, chapter 3, they're not called Jews until this time. Why is it that all of a sudden they're now going to be called Jews? It was derogatory. We don't like these boys. They're not of us. They're Jews, and we're Babylonians. And the Babylonians say to worship this image. Our king defeated your king. Our God defeated your God. You're now in our land, and our king says to bow down to this image, and you Jews are causing problems. They're a bunch of Jews. This is a derogatory term here. So these Chaldeans, in verse 9, they spoke and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, and symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up. That's the charge. In fact, they're throwing it in the face of King Nebuchadnezzar, in fact. Did you catch that? They said, Nebuchadnezzar, you have even set them up to be in charge of things, and they won't even bow down to your image. Do you understand how bad that is, King Nebuchadnezzar? We cannot allow this to go on. This is inappropriate. This is not okay. And you're going to have to do something about it, King Nebuchadnezzar, because I thought you were a great king. Boy, that's interesting. These buddies are not going to be worshiping this statue, though, are they? Well, my question for you is this. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? You can pray in the cafeteria with your eyes straight forward, still open and not bow down, and you can still pray. So why can't we just maybe kneel, maybe like half kneel, maybe, but just not in our heart worship that image, right? Why don't they just, why don't they at least try? Though they not know they're going to get thrown into a fiery furnace, like, hello, what are they, stupid? Like, what's going on here? Why don't they just put some effort into it? What's the big deal here? Well, the big deal is commandment number 2. That's the big deal. And we cannot be having this. If we're going to be Jews that are going to be honoring God, if our faith is going to be sure, it's going to end up being tested. And these boys are having a wonderful test, wonderful examination of their faith. How many of you like tests? Like when you were in school and you had a test? I loved tests. Like that was the best day of the week on test day. Bring it on. I love tests. I was that kid, when you're in class, there's like 30 of you, and you get the test, and she says, okay, go, and you flip the paper over and you start. I was always the first one to put my paper up on the desk because I was always done first. Loved it. That was me. And I would always miss like 1 point or something like that. There's always something stupid. I love tests. But I know I'm weird. I know I'm kind of weird. But I hope you like tests on a certain level, because if you're going to have faith, if you're going to claim Jesus as your Savior, let me tell you something, your faith is going to be tested. So I hope you like tests on some level, because it's going to happen. And these boys were facing a pretty significant test of their faith. It's going to happen. And it happened to them. It's going to happen to you. Our faith requires an examination to see whether or not you're in the faith, to see whether or not you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's one thing to say, yeah, I believe you, Mr. Tightrope Walker. It's another thing to get in the wheelbarrow. How many of us just like to say, you know what, God, I do believe in you. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's great. Whatever. And then time comes to get in the wheelbarrow and you're like, I don't know about that. You got to be tested. Let's find out. Let's just see how much you trust the tightrope walker here. It's going to happen. So how does Nebuchadnezzar respond to the idea that these 3 men are not worshiping the image? In verse 13, Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? The mightiest man in all of the earth, probably at this time, King Nebuchadnezzar. He could do anything he wanted with these boys. He demands an answer from them. Are you or are you not going to worship this image? Yes or no? What are they going to do? How are they going to respond? Nebuchadnezzar tells them, you're either going to worship this thing or you're getting thrown into the furnace. Your choice. And how do they respond? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in verse 16, this is their answer. Are you ready for this? This is great. They answer and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. Shut it down. Now, they're not being disrespectful. They're not being smart. They're not being, a bunch of wisecrackers. What they're basically saying is this. You know our position. We're not bowing down. And we have nothing more to say. What do you want from us? We told you we're not bowing down, and we're not going to bow down. Do you have any other questions, Nebuchadnezzar? We're not bowing down. Well, how do you think that made Mr. Nebuchadnezzar feel? He's not super happy. He's already in rage and fury. So what's going to happen to these boys? So we've seen how faith requires an examination. Now, as we start verse 19 through 25, faith remains with endurance. What's going to happen to these boys? What's their faith going to do for them? Remember we read Hebrews chapter 11? Sometimes God's people get sawn in two. Sometimes God's people get burned at the stake. Sometimes God's people are left destitute. Sometimes God's people... Sometimes it's not always sunshines and roses, guys, Sometimes God's people are let out of the den of lions. Sometimes God's people are allowed to live. Do you know what's going to happen to you? Nebuchadnezzar is going to order these men into the fiery furnace. And they have no idea what's going to happen. In fact, if we can go back for a minute, in verse 17, the boys tell Nebuchadnezzar this, if that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. At their examination, they knew they were going to be put into this furnace. They had no doubt about that. But what they did, they also knew that God was able to deliver them. Now, they didn't say that God would deliver them. Did you catch that? It does not say, they did not say that God would deliver them through the fiery furnace. It says that God is able to deliver them through the fiery furnace. And more importantly, God will deliver them from the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. That is what they were sure of. So how did they endure this? What happened? So in verse 19, then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke the command and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times hotter than it is usually heated. Nebuchadnezzar is so mad at this point. Have you ever been so mad at somebody? Like you could be in a fairly good mood. One of your kids comes home and they tell you that they wrecked the car. What happens to your facial expression at this point? You change a little bit, okay? It's a little different than it was. I'm sure that's not happened to anybody here, so that's great. But it might. When you get so mad at somebody, your facial expression is going to change. And Nebuchadnezzar was so mad at these boys because they wouldn't bow down to his image. They wouldn't do what he wanted them to do. He was so mad at them. He's like, okay, guys, that furnace, make that thing 7 times hotter than normal because we're going to fry these guys. So, okay. So those soldiers are like, okay, dude, so let's go do that. Verse 20, and he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the fiery furnace. So they were supposed to bind them, and these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. What's that? Why is that important? Usually they strip them because they want to keep the stuff. You know, that stuff's valuable. They can clothe people with it, or homeless or something there, whatever they would want to do with it. Why take good clothing and burn it? So, strip it off of them. Remember, that's what the Nazis did with the Jews before they threw them into the gas chambers. They'd shave their head because the hair would be valuable, you know. You take stuff off them before you kill them, right? You know what? The stuff that's valuable. Nebuchadnezzar was so mad at these boys, he just said, just tie them up as it is and just throw them in there. Maybe he was even hoping that their garments on there would catch on fire too, and they would just burn to a crisp right where they stood. And this fiery furnace, you're probably wondering, is it like some giant kiln, you know, that they built, you know, and they just push them in? The fiery furnace was an underground thing. There was a hatch on the top of it, and you would get, you know, they'd kick you in like this, and you drop into the fiery furnace. So that's more what it was like instead of a giant, you know, orb thing that was on ground level. Just so we're all imagining the same thing. So this furnace, 7 times hotter. The men, not allowed to even take their clothes off. They were bound with their clothes on and everything. They were dropped into the fiery furnace. This furnace is so hot, guys. Verse 27, therefore, because the king's command was urgent, like he didn't want to waste any time, just throw the boys in there, let's go. And the furnace became so hot, the flame of the fire killed the men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The soldiers, the guys, the guards that were in charge of firing up this furnace, the fire was so hot, it killed those guys. Like, this is on fire. Like, we're on fire here, guys. What were these boys thinking, do you think? As they're being bound up, Nebuchadnezzar's just furious. I'm sure his face was exchanging. He's just probably flailing all around. He's ordering these people around, make the furnace hotter, so they're going to have to get more stuff to make it hotter. Like, how are they supposed to do that? It's not like they've got argon gas and stuff that they can just turn up the thing a little bit more to make it hotter. Like, stuff's going on. Nebuchadnezzar's furious. These boys are just standing there like, this is going to be fun, you know, like, Shadrach, what's going on here, you know? Are we going to make this? Like, what's going to happen here? Are they praying to themselves? What do you think that they're thinking this entire time? But they probably had the thoughts from verses 16 through 18. Remember we read that? That their God is able, and they held out hope. Their faith had remained with their endurance. They didn't buckle one time, did they? They didn't buckle. Their faith remained with this endurance and was able to stay strong in spite of the fact that they're going to get thrown into a furnace 7 times hotter, in spite of the fact that the global leader, King Nebuchadnezzar himself, was furious, beyond furious with them. They were examined, and now they're enduring with their faith. No matter what was being thrown at them, they're able to endure and stay strong like a rock. What's your faith like as you're going through things, as you're about to be thrown into a fire furnace? Have you ever been thrown into a fire furnace of sorts? Something happened that was beyond your control. Something happened that you didn't know what's going to happen here. I don't know what the right answer is. There's a fiery furnace, and sometimes we get really perplexed and we get really down on ourselves, and we can kind of get distracted in this, and we just sort of, oh boy. You ever felt that way? Does your faith remain strong in those moments? Like, God is able to deliver me through whatever I'm going through. God is able to preserve me. And by the way, what is the theme of Daniel? As we've been going through Daniel, almost 3 chapters in now. Man behind the curtain. No matter what's going on, what we can see, God is behind the curtain pulling all the strings. Why is it that God would be able to deliver them? Because he's the one in control of the whole thing anyway. Do you ever have to wonder or worry if you're ever going to be okay in spite of anything that goes on in your life? Do you ever have to wonder or worry about anything that goes on? No, because God is behind the scenes. He's pulling all the strings. He's able to deliver you no matter what's going on. Even if it's a fiery furnace that's 7 times hotter and the leader of the world, King Nebuchadnezzar, is onto you, you can still be at rest. Because God's in control. He's the one pulling all the strings. And he's able to deliver you no matter what's going on. These boys understood that true faith remains with endurance. True faith won't be shaken by the events of the world. As these boys get up from being cast into the furnace, their clothes go up in flames and they are burned alive. Toast, right there. And it didn't take long with the furnace 7 times hotter than normal. Is that what happened? Is that what happened? Did they get burned up? Just singed alive. Just like a torch. Is that what happened to them? It's not what happened at all, is it? Verses 24 and 25 tell us this. Then King Nebuchadnezzar, so they're thrown in, and King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished. And he rose in haste and spoke and said to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of this fire? And they answered and said to the king, yeah, that's right. Look, he said, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they're not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Was God able to preserve them in the midst of a burning fiery furnace 7 times hotter than normal? Yes. He's able to deliver. He's able. Our faith can remain with that level of endurance. Even if we do get thrown into the fire, even if the worst possible thing that could happen happens, we can still endure. So how does this all end? Well, faith rewards with elevation. So they made it through. And now they're okay. So how does Nebuchadnezzar respond to these boys not being killed? Verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. They came out. Interesting. Did you notice that in the last chapter, in verse 47, Nebuchadnezzar had a very similar response to how Daniel was able to handle the dream? Did you remember that? There was a promotion. Remember that? You remember in chapter 1, there was also a promotion of Daniel and his buddies for persevering in their faith? Did you notice that? Keep in mind that testing of our faith is going to happen. It happened to these boys. It's going to happen to you. Our faith can remain with endurance, and our faith can be rewarded with elevation. What's going to happen to these boys? In verse 27, and the satraps, administrators, governors, and king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair on their head was not singed, nor were the garments affected, and the smell of fire wasn't even on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word and have yielded their bodies that they should not serve or worship any god except their own God. So, what's Nebuchadnezzar going to do in light of this information in verse 29? Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. They are promoted and God is magnified, which is the whole point of our faith anyway. Do you have such a faith that is able to magnify who your God is? How are you supposed to magnify God and make his name great and do things for him that you're supposed to be doing if when you pray for your meal, you stand straight ahead and you don't bow your head, you don't close your eyes, you make no scene about it at all? Are you even interested in magnifying your God or showing him off or demonstrating that you love him or serve him or obedient to him or anything like that? How many different ways do we cave to society, the culture? How many different times do we do things just to please people? At any time, these boys could have done any number of things to have tried to appease Nebuchadnezzar. But they endured. They did what they were supposed to do in spite of the testing, in spite of the problems, in spite of everything that was going on. They persevered and did exactly what they were supposed to do. They did not bow, they did not bend, and they did not burn. And God is able to reward with elevation those who put their faith in Him. Let's pray.